Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. We had an amazing article published on the AOEU website last week by Janet Taylor, and the article is called Rethinking Art Education for the Better. And it is, in short, a brilliant article. Janet talks about how this fall is a chance for us as art educators to rethink and reconceptualize what we do in the classroom. Just everything from top to bottom. And she has a line in there that I think speaks to everything she's trying to say. It just says it's time to rethink the what, the how, and the why of our teaching. And there's so many forms that can take, and that's what I really want to dive into with Janet today. And I don't want to take too long here at the beginning because I'm going to ask her to share a lot. She has so many good ideas, not only big picture, the whole rethinking, reconceptualizing thing, but also just about the day-to-day logistics of what's going to be happening in our classrooms. And she's really put a lot of thought into what she wants her classroom to look like this fall. And I think there's a lot there that we can take from that I think will be really worthwhile. But before we move on to the interview, I want to tell you about everything that the Art of Education University is putting together, everything that we're offering right now. Whether you're teaching fully in person, you're in some type of a hybrid model, or you're doing all remote instruction, we have resources that you need to be successful this fall. If you're a pro or a flex member, obviously just libraries full of resources that work for any of those situations. And new packs and new lessons and new resources are coming out every month that are just really responsive to what's happening right now. A couple of new packs in pro this month include understanding the logistics of teaching online and managing working from home during an extended school closure. So just a lot there that is really worthwhile and speaks to the situations that we are facing this fall. And if you don't have pro or don't have flex, don't worry. There are still thousands of resources on the AOEU website waiting for you for free. The best thing you can do is check out the Return to Learn page on the site, where we've organized resources for everyone, no matter your teaching situation. Make sure you check that out. All right, we are ready to begin this interview. All right, Janet Taylor is with me now. Janet, how are you?
I'm doing okay, hanging in there.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I guess before we dive into all of the big topics that we're going to talk about today, can we begin by just kind of setting the scene? What does back to school look like for you? What does it look like for your family right now?
Yes, that's a complicated question, right? Because there's so many facets going in there. But okay, so for me, I teach the district that I teach in. We started in a hybrid model, is what was kind of announced to us. And then there are a lot of growing concerns that teachers were having with increasing numbers of COVID cases in our county and our state. Illinois did a great job of kind of squashing that originally, kind of closing the state down and getting everybody kind of set. But as summer happened and we started to, open things back up again, we're seeing those numbers go up. So we're a little concerned as we're watching that happen. And so just this last week, actually last Friday, our district decided, wait a second, we need to reconsider this. And they decided we're going to start remote. So for me, relief, right? But basically it's going to be reevaluated every 6 weeks with a 4-phase plan. So the first 6 weeks is fully e-learning. And then we move into phase 2 if everything goes well, which is e-learning with some in-group, like in-school group or lab work if needed. And then if everything's going well that way, then we'll move into a 6-week plan of hybrid and then kind of start to evaluate into a fully in-person model. So The district I live in, though, is a little different. We've adopted a plan for hybrid in the high school and middle. And then the elementary students are fully in person. And I should add that both districts actually have a fully remote option. So for students who can't go in, that was always the plan. So for me, because I'm dealing with both districts and kind of ever-changing plans and watching things happen, it's been pretty interesting. My own children are immunodeficient. So we immediately opted for that remote option for their school. And then I was kind of like, right. Well, what do I do for my own career then? Because I'm supposed to go into hybrid and I can't bring that back to my own kids and my own family. So I could either like push to teach this online academy through my district and hope that it worked out. Or in my case, I would have to resign my position fully. So it's been, to say the least, like a tumultuous summer, right? Yeah. So I know nothing is ideal, but I'm really grateful that the district that I teach in, as I mentioned, has moved to remote, or at least start remote. And we actually just pushed out the start date for the students too, which honestly gave everybody a sense of, okay, we can take some time, we can figure this out a little bit. It's amazing the weight that has been kind of lifted off of me, just knowing that piece alone. And thinking about like preparing our students, not only for the start of remote, but also any sort of transitions as we slowly kind of move, depending on what's going on. So in my case, to kind of like sum that up, right, I'm going to be teaching from home. I've set up literally this weekend, I set up a whole school in my basement because last year it was like my kids were, bouncing all over the place, and I was trying to teach in my basement and then sometimes outside and wherever I could fit. So this time I'm like, okay, we need to establish a space for everybody to have success. So hopefully we'll see. That might last 2 days and then be a hot mess, but we'll see.
Yeah. But honestly, nothing's going to be perfect, but I think you raise an important point there, because all the districts that I've seen who are slowing down and taking time, whether that be back in March or whether that be right now, I think they're so much more successful because of it. So hopefully that will be the same case with you. But the real reason I wanted to have you on, though, was to talk about your article that just published. So it was called Rethinking Art Education for the Better. So can you, I guess, talk about the impetus for writing that article, first of all, and then just explain it a little bit for people who haven't read it?
Yeah. Okay. So I laugh about this because I would say I have a lot of big picture, probably too ambitious utopian ideas about art education and education as a system as a whole. So what happened was I was actually getting really upset about all the conversations that were happening back and forth with community and admin and teachers, and a lot of conflict, a lot of different opinions and feelings about this, a lot of different perspectives, right? And there's a lot of facets to everything. Mm-hmm. And something that I kept thinking is why do we have to be stuck in that structure that exists? And why aren't we thinking about the potential that could be, right? So, for example, we're so familiar with the box and the system that's kind of set up to fit inside that box. And I kept wondering, why are we not just rethinking how this whole system is set up? Because this is an opportunity for that, right? So I'm not going to go into all the details, of course, of my thoughts on education and the utopia that I say it can be. But if we have to work within a system in just a few short weeks, right? Because we don't have a whole lot of that's the other piece, right? The first part of your question originally was what's going on? And every day it feels like things are changing. So instead of, trying to fit inside that box, why are we not thinking about how it can actually work for us? So the article in general basically talks about why remote learning didn't really work in the spring. I mean, it did, but it didn't, right? But also how we can set up remote and hybrid or whatever to succeed kind of this time around. So also kind of how things are and should be thought about differently in general as we start the school year, as opposed to managing with what we had. my goal kind of was to take a fresh look on how, what, and why we teach in this new context.
Yeah, that's good. So I want to talk about that difference though between last year and this year, and kind of how that's, you know, sort of played into your thinking here with all of the stuff that you're talking about. So how would you describe the end of the last school year, and like what is your mindset because of that? Like, what is your mindset going into this fall?
Right. So my frustrations, of course, like I said, lie in this. Well, remote learning was such a failure. You know, how is it going to be different this year? What are my students going to do? And I kind of am like, wait a second. You know, last year was pretty successful given what we had, right? It was literally triage mode, like survival, you know?
Yes.
So there's a few things about the spring that you have to kind of remember, right? So we had to turn teaching literally on its head. And in my case, at my district, we did it over a weekend, right? We, you know, everybody had like spring breaks kind of intermingled in there and whatnot. But in my district, we literally learned about this on Friday. The kids went home on Friday. And by Tuesday, we were teaching completely remotely, right?
Oh man.
So very little notice. Yeah. Ever-changing guidance. Our state, our district had different guidance constantly. Can we give grades? What kind of grades? You know, what does attendance look like? You know, all those factors. And then that doesn't even account for, right, like equity and access that was happening too across the board between technology or materials. So, I mean, honestly, it's like, who was actually prepared for a pandemic? Like, it's like that question when you're like, who's ready for the zombie apocalypse, right? It's kind of like that moment. And I certainly was not one of those people. So that's like a big thing we need to remember about the spring, right? So like most teachers, it's over the summer now, we've had this chance to like, okay, let's kind of close the chapter on spring. Let's figure out what the heck we're doing in the fall. And in the meantime, we're trying to balance our own self-care in the summer and listening to news and listening to what's happening with our districts.
Yep.
So I don't know about you, Tim, but it was like a constant balance for me between sobbing and then like panic. And then I was like really angry and anticipating all of these unknowns. And it was like every single day was a different range of emotions, right?
Different emotion every day. You never knew what was coming.
Never knew.
Yes,
yeah. It's like, exactly, oh God, why am I crying now? Exactly. Right. Right. So all summer I basically spent like this time inundated with like social media, waiting for something to happen, right? Waiting for my state and district to make some sort of decision so that I could plan because, right, I think we talk about this all the time. Our teachers and teachers in general are big planners. That's what we do, right?
Yep.
So I'll be honest, I've been like really paralyzed to do anything, to make any sort of movement until, you know, literally yesterday. And you know what, I think a lot of people feel that way and I think it's okay, right? I mean,
right.
It doesn't feel okay, but at some point you have to be like, it's okay to say I can't make decisions yet, you know? So now that my district has kind of made those decisions and I've made some personal decisions, I can kind of move forward. So, with that being said,
yes,
you know, this is kind of my I'm actually reinvigorated and excited because I'm thinking about the potential, right? So in the spring, we tried to kind of take what was in our classroom and we tried to repurpose it for online situation. And that's just not going to work. And we need to say, like, that's just not great, done, right? It's just not the same now. And instead of constantly getting frustrated on how to make it work, it's time to really rethink it all together. And when you stop trying to make things fit, it's kind of like this aha moment that you have. And no joke, I just felt like I'm no longer stuck in this construct, right? I can just relax and I can see this amazing potential of what we can do with art education. So this includes opportunities to really reflect on what did work, you know, in the spring, because there were things that worked, right? and kind of think about why those things worked. And then think about what is actually different as we start as opposed to last year. And then how can we take that information and set up our students for success? Kind of like I said, I'm trying to set up my own children in my basement for success, right?
Yes.
Like, okay,
Yes.
like obviously them, trying to do their own Zoom calls while I'm trying to Zoom with my kids or my students is not going to work again. So like we need to rethink this, right? So for me at this moment, which like I keep saying, tomorrow might totally change, but I'm like really excited to think about establishing new ways to create community, a new way about thinking about teaching art really, and like, what are my values, and getting down to those core values and really those essential standards and saying, this is what art education is really about. So lastly, the other thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned was that I'm really also very grateful for autonomy as an art teacher. This is really an opportunity to provide our students with as many authentic experiences that they really won't get anywhere else, right? And I'm excited to share how creativity will help those students address concerns that they're feeling, to spread their voice, to actually say, this is your voice and this impacts other people, right? This is your art and what you're saying is important, and being able to connect that in their lives no matter where they go in life. So I'm excited.
No, that's a good thing. And I think that last thing you said was key, just, in amplifying our students' voices. I think we are going to see some good things happening once kids start creating again.
Yeah.
But I want to sort of drill down into this idea of, rethinking what you're doing. And I guess just asking you about the logistics and details, because a lot of people see, they hear, oh, let's rethink what we're doing. But then they never sort of figure out exactly what that looks like. So can you talk about that? Like, what are you wanting to teach this fall? What are some of the roadblocks or some of the struggles that you see coming? Or like, do you have specific strategies that you can share with people that you think are going to help?
Yeah, so I can talk directly from my own experiences at this point, right? Like my own examples, because I'm like so in the depths of that right now, obviously. But I will say that, in general, when I say, yes, we need to rethink art education and what that means in this new context, a lot of times teachers will say, oh, yes, well, I'm trying to think of a good example, but let's do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's not actually still reinventing education, right, as it needs to be to serve our students where they're at in this situation. That's just, again, like a creative way of repackaging what's happening in the classroom. So in the article, I give some more concrete examples of kind of how to rethink your teaching kind of from a philosophical point of view. Rethinking your expectations is one, right? That's important to do. Ways to connect art to real life ideas. I think that's going to be really important right now as kids are not physically with you or not with you every day, right? Integrating social emotional strategies are, I keep saying like, this is the most important, and then I keep adding another one on, right? But social emotional strategies is going to be so essential this year. For everyone involved, right? For us too, as teachers, right? To kind of go through that and process with our kids. Yeah. Kind of looking at the standards and really thinking about maybe even what those standards mean in this new context. So not just saying, connect, what does that mean? And how do I apply that to my art education? But what does this mean in this new context of where our students are? Yeah. And then of course, like, materials, right? Materials is going to be a big one, right? What does that mean? And how do we do that? So, for me, I'll give you a kind of a picture or glimpse into my brain for a moment. Yeah. So, which is a scary place, right? But for me, so I teach jewelry metals, 4 levels of that. I teach sculpture 1 and 2, and I teach all 3 portfolios of the AP art and design course, right? And because I teach AP, I'm thinking, of course, of like all sorts of media, not just jewelry metal sculpture. I'm thinking like photography and painting and all that, and how those things will work. So in the spring of 2020, I moved my curriculum, you may remember from our coronavirus webinar, into kind of that focus of teaching for creativity and design thinking opportunities, and also providing those social emotional connections. And I think a lot of that was because, I didn't want my students sitting on a computer all the time, because I knew they were going to do that with their other classes, right? And also it was kind of what is the point? How are we, I guess going back to that survival mode, like we just need to kind of get through this, right? So this fall, it's not going to be that much different in that idea, right? And that idea set that we need to keep our connections and our students are going to be sitting on computers all day, and that we need to focus on their mental health and how we're thinking about that. So in my traditional classroom, right, I might set up a structure and scaffolding at the beginning of the year and slowly release more choice. I guess I should say I'm a choice teacher, if people don't know that. So I'm a choice teacher, a choice art teacher. And a lot of the misconception a lot of times is like, I give my students a lot of choice. They revert back to old behaviors of sloppy work, or the quality goes down, or it's a free-for-all, or kids don't know how to come up with ideas. And it's in a choice setting, you really have to scaffold, right? You really have to scaffold a lot of that to prepare them to make those choices. So in my traditional classroom, I do that from day one, right? So starting fall of 2020, if this was normal life, I would set up a lot of structure into how to use the classroom and how to manage materials and how to do a certain technique, like low stakes practice, and then get into the choice, and the choice kind of scaffolds from there. So I don't foresee that being any different in a remote or hybrid situation for me, because that's kind of like my value system, right? So for jewelry metals and sculpture kids, I'm definitely going to start out with exploration. I think I'm going to make up some supply boxes and bags. I literally just started thinking about this yesterday, like what's going to go in those and how am I going to get them to the kids, and right. But I would start them out, for example, making their own sketchbook, maybe exploring different media, composition techniques. In the meantime, that allows me space to kind of get to know my students a little bit more in other venues, right? So they might be able to have this low stakes opportunity to practice, and we start to form those connections that way. Then, so between that and maybe like a exploration of media or materials, so maybe like a low budget jewelry or a recycled sculpture assignment, or 50 things, that kind of stuff. That's my intention, is that is going to buy me time to figure out what's going to happen next. So honestly, right. So sadly,
that's a good strategy to be
right. I mean, I'm definitely going to be thinking about it along the way, of course, but my hopes are the first thing I can do is focus on getting my kids busy with their hands, not in front of the computer all the time, getting to know each other in authentic ways. And then I can worry about where we're going to go and how we're going to scaffold technique, let's say. I mean, obviously in metalsmith, in metals class, we're not doing metalsmithing in remote. So, that's going to be a little challenge. It's definitely a concern of mine, right? I literally built that program in our school from scratch, and now we've doubled sections, and I was so excited. And so honestly, it's the reason why it's so a great class is because it's just a really cool class, right? So you get to saw metals and you get to use a torch, and then you get to wear your artwork around. I mean, who wouldn't sign up for that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm concerned because I obviously I pushed that class by saying, this is so cool, you get to use a torch, and it's not a beading class. So the idea of not having my students in class using those tools, being super loud, moving around like, bees in a hive at all times, it's honestly a little sad to me, right? And in a hybrid situation, I can guarantee that my students will at least get like some exposure to that. But at home, they're not. It's just not safe for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
So, so that's why I'm like, I just need to buy a little time to really figure this out,
Figure out what it's going to look like.
Yeah. I think another challenge is when working with multiple media like AP, I'm hoping that I can have multiple supply drop off and pickup dates throughout our remote times so that students can maybe, if they need a specific material that they want to work on, I can teach them a little executive functioning and planning ahead and maybe proposing some of that to me, so that maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, I can kind of get them a new set of supplies. That is a good way. I know this isn't like rethinking art education, but that's a good concrete example of, how to not plan for the whole semester all right now. Right.
Right.
And I also think, if you can do those kinds of things, that's a great way to also see them in person once in a while, kind of connect, to remind them kind of why we're in this together. Like we are together in this, you and me. I might be able to see some of their artwork, celebrate some of what they've been working on. And then, okay. So lastly, I'll have to say this. I wrap all of my teaching explicitly around teaching the creative process, right? So I gave you all these concrete little examples of logistics, but when it comes to actually rethinking art education, what does that look like, right? So you can read obviously more about how I do this in some other articles I've written about this topic, but especially while students are not in front of me, I have got to get them in a routine of making their thinking visible so that I can support them through their process as they progress. So again, it's not going to be for me, we might be synchronous, we might be asynchronous learning, but the best way that I can rethink education is to take those core values and figure out how to deliver that to them, or how to rework that importance and what does that look like for them in this situation. So when students are documenting, annotating, talking about the process, they really learn so much more about themselves and make those connections about why they're making intentional choices. So to me, that's going to be really important to kind of continue that structure as our creative routine, since they won't be with me. So that, again, that kind of goes back to our original discussion was, how to rethink this. It's like, okay, how am I going to ensure that my students are continually making creative connections and are authentically engaged in the process and not just fulfilling a checklist? Right. Does that make sense?
Yep, for sure. And I don't know, I think that's a challenge that we're going to be facing no matter whether you're face to face or teaching online. It's something that needs to be solved. But I actually, well, first of all, let me say just thank you for all of those amazing ideas. But secondly, I wanted to go back to something you just mentioned earlier, which was the importance of social and emotional learning. The importance of student voice, putting that all together this fall in obviously what is not an ideal situation. So, I guess I would ask you this, like, how are you planning on helping students explore, their emotions, social and emotional learning? How can they explore their creativity, their voice? Like, how are you going to give them the opportunities to express themselves?
Right. Of course. So, I've spoken about choice a lot. I've mentioned that. This summer I did this webinar for NAEA, specifically on choice, and the questions that kept popping up was like, okay, this is awesome, but how is this going to help us in the fall? And my response constantly was, you know what? I don't really know yet, but what I do know strongly, what I strongly believe in, it's going to be essential for choice to be helping empowering student voice. This year, especially, hands down, I just cannot reinstate that enough, right? In a typical year, as I mentioned, I scaffold choice with a lot of supports and structures, right? Both technically and conceptually, to prepare them for that self-expression. And so personally, in general, I would not advise just starting out like, okay, you have a huge range of choice, go for it, figure out what you want. That's too hard and overwhelming for students in general, right?
Yeah.
But this year, especially, I would not start your class by talking about, my opinion, right? I would not start your class on day one talking about COVID and how it's impacted their household or how they feel about the Black Lives Movement, right? The Black Lives Matter movement. Most likely, you don't even know a lot of these kids in your class. They don't know each other. They're not physically in the space together even to navigate body language and all that. So it's going to be first important to create that safe environment that is built on trust in order to kind of progress into student voice. I do think, though, as soon as you start, it's important to start taking that temperature on how comfortable students are by maybe doing something, again, like a low stakes personal prompt, sketchbook prompt or something like that. Maybe giving them a choice of a topic that they want to address that's more private, that's only shared between the two of you. And if they want to share out, they can share out, for example. But here's the key. When providing choice, I find it also incredibly important not to only expose students to various artists who are addressing specific topics that you might be providing them, but also give them a choice of the direction that they want to pursue. So, for example, if you were to be given 3 prompts to choose from, probably don't start with 3 heavy topics, right?
Right.
Instead, try to give kind of an easy, medium, hard, I guess. More like emotionally safe versus emotionally charged, kind of a scale. Say. So, this is maybe not the best example. I just kind of came up with this. But so one prompt of the 3 could be draw one unique natural object from observation, right? It's pretty low stakes, right? Okay, I can go out in my backyard, pick out a stick and draw it, right? Yep. The second could be draw one object that seems to have a clear emotion and then maybe write a little story about it, right? So now you're connecting with the object, connecting with your own emotions. It might be for some students that might be difficult, right? And then the last one could be for those students who are really wanting to express themselves. Maybe it's draw an object that reflects how you're handling one challenging topic right now. So again, you're not saying talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? You're saying what is important to you right now and try to express an object that relates to that. So again, maybe not the best example, but maybe you can see how you're addressing, for example, observational drawing prompt, but in 3 different emotional options for students to kind of work through. And then the hopes are, right, as you work through that, you're starting to engage in critiquing, maybe more discussion, and again, that low stakes artworks, like mini artworks or something like that, with ideas that go with them. And then given that opportunity to explore what is personal to the student, you're encouraging them to understand themselves a little bit better. You're empowering them to make more meaningful artworks that have possible, very powerful implications, right? There's, in my opinion, since I've made that switch to choice and kind of that journey, there's truly nothing more exciting to me than seeing a student find their passion for a particular topic kind of on their own, but also to see the impact their voice has on others. I mean, seriously, if ever there was a more critical time for choice and student voice, like this is it, you know?
Yes, that is very true. That's very well said. So Jen, I honestly can't thank you enough for all of these amazing ideas. Before we head out, do you have any final words of advice, anything you want to share with everybody as we kind of move into this uncertain fall here?
Yes, I would definitely say to really be self-aware, be gentle with yourself and with others. There's certainly enough turmoil kind of swirling around everyone with everyone's unique situation. And now is truly a time to connect with everyone and with others, not to criticize yourself. And just the best I can say is just try to breathe, because we're not alone. We're all in this together.
Yeah, that's very true. We have a whole community of art teachers here to help and support. And like this whole interview is going to be a huge help and a huge support for so many people. So, Janet, thank you so much for your time, for your ideas, for sharing everything with us. It was great to talk to you today.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you so much to Janet for coming on, for sharing all of her ideas. If you have not read her Rethinking Art Education for the Better article, please go do that. We will link to it in the show notes. It is on the AOEU website. And while you're on the AOEU website, go visit that Return to Learn page that I mentioned in the beginning of the show. Okay, whether you're in person, whether you have some sort of a hybrid model, whether you're doing remote learning, we have put together all the resources that we have to help you and kind of find success. It's all free. It's all available to you. Make sure you go check that out on the AOE website. You should be able to find everything you need to help you find success this fall. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Thank you, as always, for listening. Best of luck to everyone who is headed back to school this week. Stay safe, stay healthy, do what you need to do to take care of yourself, and we will talk to you next week.